Hey everybody, welcome back to Overwatch Champions. Today we have another highly requested video for you, and we're going to be covering King's Row. But before we get started, I just want to give a huge thanks to everyone who has stuck with our channel so far. Our poll results from last week are in, and Reinhardt will be the first hero covered in our hero guides. And we've already hit the 1, 2, and 300 subscriber marks on the channel, and it continues to grow every day, so thank you so much for all the support. My name is Odin, and we're going to be covering some of the common attack and defense strategies utilized on this map, as well as some pitfalls to look out for. King's Row is all about the hallways. I mean, almost 2/3 of this map is the hallway, and flanking points, which are also hallways, are littered all the way throughout. Flanks can be pretty enticing, but I'll also cover why you shouldn't flank in some areas. So let's take a look at King's Row. First up, let's give a quick overview of the main and fallback points for the defense. A setup that we've been seeing utilized by the top teams for basically as long as this map has been being played involves controlling the space just in front of the capture point, while a ranged DPS holds up near the apartments and the first and second balconies as the attackers push in. Overextending past the statue on defense carries a high risk and is not recommended in most cases unless you're maybe a Reaper pushing behind during an attack, especially considering the spawn locations on this map. Even if you do manage to make your way over and pick off 1 or 2 players without being found right away, you'll quickly find yourself being cut off from your team by the attacking team respawns. There are 2 main defensive tactics on this point, and the first of which is falling back to the archway when the attacking team explodes onto site, and I'm talking about the defensive archway towards where you spawn. This is usually best if they speed boost in and your team gets split, allowing your mid-range DPS like Soldier to play from second balcony, and it's extremely hard for the attacking team to deal with that. And it also gives you a chance to retaliate before they get the first of the 3 nodes on point if you do it correctly. The second of which is to send a few players towards Car, probably behind Reinhardt's shield, and maybe send a few players through the small room to pincer them. In this tight enclosed area, it can be really effective and catches a lot of teams off guard. Now moving on to fallback at second point. First thing to make sure you're doing is watching out for your spawns. If your team is split up, you want to avoid any sort of confrontation until you're able to group up. This is especially true since the defending team spawns so far back at the 3rd point if you miss that spawn. So just be careful not to initiate before you really have a solid chance of winning the fight. Strong setup usually involves hanging up with Rein's shield at either the first or second corner, depending on where the payload is, and you potentially want to have a DPS player on bar, but it's usually best to stay on the ground level, especially if they have multiple long-range heroes or a consistent flanker. Flanking as a defender is generally only a good idea if you have an ultimate like Reaper's Death Blossom and you communicate to your team when you plan to go in. Flanking regularly through balcony or bar alley can lead to easy attacking picks, since they can just turn their attention to you and pick you off quickly. When falling back to the capture point on the second corridor before the final stretch, it's also important to look out for players pushing through the boiler room or flanking from the second attacker spawn, so keep that in mind as well. The final point for defense is pretty tricky, but it plays pretty similarly to the second point. Utilizing those side rooms near the first and second bend can be pretty useful for defending, but try to avoid the temptation of playing on top of the small room repeatedly, since competent attacking teams will adjust to deal with you. And this map is just so easy to snowball for attackers, especially the last point, where the defenders have no cover when they're leaving spawn. So since we covered a lot of the setups that the defense probably want to use, I'll just briefly mention some attack routes on each point, and what to avoid doing. On the first point, you want to spend as little time in the actual gate choke as possible, either using the Rein's Shield Lucio Speed Boost combo to wrap around the right side of the statue, and send a Reaper or Roadhog through the small room for picks and push the site, or use the same combo to push out of the hotel and push the high ground, and then drop down on the attackers. Pushing their long-range DPS off of the apartment and getting control to drop down is an extremely useful tactic. On second point, you're basically throwing yourself at the enemy team, but attacking flankers can actually be useful here, and if you get a pick, you can open up a window to snowball very quickly. As you approach the second bend, spreading out around the bar and boiler room is also a good way to deny the attacking team any kind of footing, and you can use the balcony to push up towards boiler, but the enemy team can usually spot this very easily, so be careful. On the final point, it's much of the same, catching a player out of position on the defending team and pushing them hard with a few strong ganking heroes like Roadhog or Reaper just allows you to continue your snowball, especially with ults. Some heroes can also use the window above small room to flank back and line up a pickoff on support, and this is also very useful in some situations. A lot of what happens on this map is really dictated by momentum, so recognizing when your team is bleeding kills or you're just not effectively pushing as a team is really important so that you can regroup and think level-headed about what you want to do next. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you found this video helpful and you're able to coordinate some effective first point pushes and better understand where and how to defend the other points. If you haven't already, you can click below here to check out our older episodes, and click here to subscribe to our channel to keep up to date on all of our releases. Keep an eye out for our first hero guide on Friday featuring Reinhardt, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, get out there and be the hammer.